Okay, we're going to look at the beginnings of our Voron printer build. Got interested in this a while ago. I've got the parts assembled now. I bought a kit. We'll look at the one I bought in a minute. I've printed most all of the parts. There are a couple more that are still printing. We'll go through what I did to print them. I just basically followed the instructions, but just so you know roughly what it took to get it done. And I have looked at some of the accessory kits for maybe a wire loom, or there you can buy printed parts. None of those really were easily available. You know, that was going to take weeks or months to get them, if they were available at all. And so we're just going to do this one totally on our own. Other than we did buy the kit of parts, I didn't go in and out and source each piece individually. I did find a decent looking kit, and I've gotten it in. So we're going to go over all that today. Probably not going to build anything today, at least not on the video, but just get started on what is going on. So this page here is the Voron web page, vorondesign.com. We're going to be building a Voron 0.1. So this is the smallest one. I wanted to start there. The larger ones look pretty amazing, but I wanted to start with a smaller one. It's a little bit less money for the parts, for one thing, and they look like pretty complicated builds, so I want to make sure that we're able to do this one before we move on to one of the bigger ones, and maybe even use this one to print parts for the bigger one. One thing about printing the parts for these, if you don't source the parts from, I found them on eBay and Etsy and places like that, if you don't get those printed for you, they do have to be printed in a heat-resistant material. Most people recommend ABS. And so what that means is that you have to have a printer able to print ABS parts. And I do have one that can do that. Actually, I've been printing all of these parts on a Prusa Mini. So everything that I've printed so far, and I think all the pieces that I have left are much smaller, but all of them have been able to print really well on a Prusa Mini, open air, not enclosed or anything. I've printed them in ABS using the generic ABS profile on the Prusa slicer, and I'm going to have to reprint one, but only because it warped a little bit. It would work fine as far as doing what it needs to do. I just don't think it looks as nice, so I will reprint that one. Unfortunately, it's one of the longest ones to print. It took 4 hours to print that one piece, so I'll reprint that one just so it looks better. But how you start with this, there's not, that I know of, a company that builds Voron printers. Maybe somebody eventually will take on that task of assembling the things, but there are companies that will assemble the parts for you. There is a list of all the parts. If you want to go and try and source everything individually, then that's certainly an option. I don't know that that's really the best option, because most of these parts are much cheaper if you can buy them in volume, and you don't need, and then split them out into a bunch of little kits. Whereas if you need to buy just the ones for your printer, it's probably going to cost a little bit more by the time you buy a large set of stuff and you have a bunch of extras. So you start with deciding what kind of printer do you want. I want the Voron 0. It's actually a version 0.1. So there's a slight bit of upgrades from the 0, I suppose. Then there's a very good looking manual. I've downloaded it and looked through it. It's very informative, lots of diagrams. It looks like it's very step by step, very complete. There are CAD models if you want to adjust anything yourself, so you can go into CAD software and adjust things. I haven't done any of that. I just went straight to the STLs. So actually this link doesn't take you directly to the STLs. It takes you to some CAD files, but those are if you want to adjust things. But if you go back up here to the Voron 0 link, that one will actually take you to the STL file. So it does, that link that says STLs doesn't go actually to the STLs, but here they are. There are a lot. All of these here are, actually I've printed all of these, and they are over here on the table. So all of these gray pieces in here are the ones that I printed. So I just had gray ABS on hand, so mine may not be very fancy looking with all the highlighted colors, at least not to begin with. Mine's going to be black extruded aluminum pieces that came from the Formbot kit that I bought, and gray ABS pieces that I printed. So there are quite a few, but most of them are pretty small. The one piece I want to reprint is this guy, because it warped ever so slightly. You can probably see well, I don't know if you can. There's a little bit of a taper towards this end. It would be fine. This just sits on the top. It's called the top hat, so it just sits on the top of the printer to kind of finish out the enclosure for it. And it would be fine the way it is. It just won't look quite as nice, and it's right on the top, so it's really visible. So I am going to reprint that one. I do have one more of these to print. It's currently printing right now, in fact. It should be done in maybe another hour or so. So that would give us all of the parts that we need to assemble most of the printer, all of these parts. Then you pick a couple of door handles and panel mounting, so the side panels, how to mount those. You know, notice this guy is, well, this one doesn't have a good picture of an assembled one. Let's look at the, here we go. Here's what they look like when they're assembled. This is the kit that I bought. It has either a V6 hot end, so just your E3D V6 hot end. It has a Dragon. I went with the Dragon. And then it has a Dragon high flow. I did not go with the high flow Dragon. These little things print extremely fast. They're Core XY machines, which means that the bed is going to stay stationary for the most part. It does raise up and down in this printer, but it does that very slowly, so the bed itself doesn't have to move back and forth. So that lets you print a little bit faster. Plus, the mechanics of the Core XY system also allow for this very high-speed printing. So if I want to print really fast, I do need a little higher flow hot end. But I didn't think for this size machine. Let me show you the bed size on this. Here's the bed. Well, here it is right here. There's the print surface. So, you know, you've got a really small bed. Four and 3/4 by 4 3/4 inches or so. Beds print area. So it's not a super large print area. So I didn't think I needed the high flow end. That does add another $10, so it's not that big a deal over the standard Dragon. But I didn't go for that. It just seemed like it was a little too much overkill. But there's the price. I believe that's probably the price I paid for it a couple of months ago also. And this is what they look like when they're assembled. They look very clean. They're completely enclosed, and they've got the panels. You might not can tell or resolve the panels just from the screen here, but there's clear panels on most of the sides. The back panel has an opaque panel on it. A little door on the front, so you can kind of get an idea for the scale of this thing. And you know, you print the panel parts. I haven't printed those yet. You pick your tool head version for whatever tool head you're using, or using a direct drive or a Bowden setup. Print those parts. The top hat, that's the little enclosure on top. And then all of these little pieces here. Total, I probably printed pretty constant during the day. I didn't print overnight. Pretty much during the day, I printed for a week, I think, with one Prusa Mini. So I didn't try to spread it out over different printers. I let one printer handle everything. Most of the time, one part at a time. Although you could load several of these on the bed at once for some of these setups. I just did them mostly one at a time. So that took maybe a week of printing, with the one failure being that one part that technically did print, but it has a little bit of warping to it. I added a brim and they print fine. Let's look at what I did to print. In fact, why don't we do that? So here's my setup. This is what it's printing right now, the last, other than the reprint, of the top hat pieces. And all I'm doing is exactly what the manual says to do. 40% infill. I'm printing at 0.2 millimeter layer height. I'm doing 4 walls, 5 top and bottom layers, and everything else is the standard setup. For the filament settings, I'm going, well, let's go over here. I'm going with the generic ABS setting in the Prusa slicer. I did create this little profile for Voron parts, but basically all that does is it sets the walls to 4, top and bottom layers to 5, and infill to 40%. And everything else is controlled by the filament settings and the generic Prusa setup for ABS. So I'm doing the Prusa Mini version of this guy, and like I said, it hasn't had any issues. One potential issue is that this does set the heat bed pretty high. I think it sets it maybe to 100 degrees. Let's see if we can find that. That might be in the filament settings actually. Yeah, it sets it to 100 degrees, and so that's not a problem. I've got this printer over in another, almost like a closet, with most of my other printers, and the one thing that will happen, that I think will happen, is the PEI on the little Prusa PEI sheet starting to get a little bit of bubbles scattered around in it, and so I think it will degrade the PEI running it that hot for a week basically, and so I might end up with some loss of the PEI coating on there. I don't know. So far it hasn't actually peeled off or anything, but there are some little bubbles forming in it running it that hot. Other than that, I haven't seen any problems. So my plan is to begin following this manual. I'll go ahead and look through this manual a little bit. Oh, well, it's going to give me an error on downloading it right now. Well, we'll come back to the manual. Basically, the manual walks you step by step on what to do. Let's look at this kit and what all you get in here. So I've looked at the kit pretty well. If I can get these to go off, there we go. I've kind of laid out all the parts. I haven't sorted out all of the hardware, fastener hardware, but I have noticed a couple of things that uses some heat set inserts, so that's going to mean I need to be able to do heat set inserts. That's not a big deal. You can use your soldering iron. You're going to need a soldering iron anyway for some of these parts. A lot of the stuff are crimp connectors, but there could be some that you want to solder, but you do need a heat source at least for your heat set inserts. You can heat them up and drop them in without a soldering iron. It's just most simple to do it with a soldering iron. So you will need that. There are lots of JST style connectors that need to be done if you don't get a wiring kit. I did find a V0 wiring loom pre-built, but the lead time on it was like 8 weeks, and so that was, I don't want to wait that long for it. I probably, had a thought long enough ahead, should have gone ahead and ordered that months ago, and then it would be here sometime around now. But I'm going to go ahead, and this kit, the Formbot kit, does give you all the wires, all the connectors, everything to create your own loom. It even gives you a little bit of loom material. This is really just to get to the hot end though. So we'll probably do some loom work with just thread. So we'll look at that later on once we get some stuff to wire up. It has all of the extruded aluminum already cut. It's already drilled for like any connecting holes. I believe any necessary tap holes might already be tapped. I don't know if there are any that need to be tapped. I have 5 linear rails in here, super tiny little linear rails. But they look good enough for what we're going to need to do. They do have the end stops in there, which is good. If you've ever messed with these things without any kind of end stop on there, or without the little carriage being taped on, then you know that there's a massive danger of letting the carriage slide off of the rail, and in that case you would end up with little ball bearings everywhere, and most likely you would never get that back together. So this one does have kits that have end stops on them. Some of the parts you print actually are also helping you to not let the carriage slide off during assembly. I don't know where they ended up in here, but there were some little pieces that would temporarily hold the carriage from sliding off the end. I got one that has Raspberry Pi 3 and the SKR Mini E3 for the control board. So we'll be able to run Clipper to the SKR 3, Mini 3, I think it is, version 2. Yeah, the E3 version 2 mini. And fans, there's the Dragon hot end here. It uses a pancake, a different kind of a moon stepper motor for the extruder, I believe. So that's a little bit different. It also doesn't use NEMA 17s. These are a little bit smaller bolt pattern than the NEMA 17, but they are several layers thick, so they're pretty torquey in the end anyway for moving the X and Y. The Z is more, it looks like a NEMA 17 with the Z rod already installed. It looks like everything that you're going to need other than the tools. I am going to go have to find, I think it's over there on the back, in the back there, the tool for putting these connectors together, since I am going to go that route and build our own wiring loom. There's a particular tool for this style of connector that makes it a lot easier to do versus trying to use just needle nose pliers or something. So that's here's a little anti-backlash nut even. It looks like everything you're going to need is here, and all of this stuff looks well done in this kit. So again, this is the Formbot kit. There are other kits. There was another kit that I saw that was quite a bit more expensive, and I didn't go with that one, but it did look like it had maybe slightly better components in it. But without actually having that kit, I don't know for sure. This kit, I'm not complaining about it at all. This kit looks really really good. Now maybe once we get into building things, we'll notice some tolerancing issues or something like that, but everything here looks good. The heat bed, the heat surface is good. The heater itself looks good. I haven't checked the flatness of the little bed, but it looks like it's going to be sufficient for what we need to do. Plus, it's so tiny that I don't think there's going to be a problem with flatness there. And it's plenty thick. You know, that's what, 5mm thick aluminum. So I don't think there's going to be any warping because it's too thin anyway. If we need to resurface it, then we'll do that. But I really don't think that's going to be a problem. All of the parts that if some of these need to assemble within themselves, the tolerancing on the print, this has nothing to do with the kit. This is the printing. They all seem very well thought out on where they allowed tolerances and where they didn't. Everything looks to do what it's supposed to do really well. And so I'm kind of looking forward to building it. It's going to take a lot to build it. This is actually more intimidating than the very first printer I built. So the very first printer I built was one of the the little triangle looking Mendel type printers years and years and years ago. Basically the kits came with all thread for the frame of it, and you printed out some parts and stuck it together, and that thing worked. This looks more intimidating than that one did, actually. But I can see where everything's going. The manual is very good, and I'm not afraid of it. It just looks like there's going to be quite a bit of work. I would definitely not say that, hey, if you're interested in 3D printing, you need to go get one of these kits. This is probably not where you want to start, unless you just really, really have a lot of mechanical type background already. Probably a lot to start with. There's some better kits that are cheaper for one thing, and can get you to the printing part a lot faster if you're interested in 3D printing and want to find out about it. But if you've already gotten past that point, you built your Ender 3 or your little TiVo or whatever, then and you want to do a little bit more, maybe you want to explore the ideas of some high-speed printing. These things, like I said, can print extremely fast, high speeds, high accelerations. Maybe you want a Core XY printer. You haven't had one of those. Then yeah, this is probably a good place to start. Now, is this scale the right size? This is going to not print large parts. You're limited to a really small print area. The volume, the height is decently tall, but reality of what I end up printing day to day, 90-something% of what I print is going to fit on that size bed. Every now and then, yeah, it's nice to be able to print a larger part, but most of the time, everything I print, every one of these parts here, other than the little top hat corners, would have fit on this. In fact, that's kind of my plan, is to get this one up and running, get it set up to print some ABS, and start printing its own parts a little bit better. Print parts for one of the larger Vorons. The next step up from here is the Voron 2, I think, is what I would go with next. So this is more of your traditional looking printer. We can have a gallery for this one, so we can see kind of, well, they're all close-up shots. You don't get a good idea of what they look like outside of here. But, you know, this printer is a true flat bed where the bed doesn't move at all, and the gantry that holds the print head moves up and down. Plus, there are some of these that I've noticed have true automatic bed leveling, where it doesn't adjust for an unflat bed, it adjusts the bed itself, so it tilts the bed to where it is parallel with the motion of the print head. I'm sort of outside right now, so you get a lot of traffic noise because it's the first day of fall and it's kind of nice today, so I wanted to be a little more outside, or at least have the room open. All right, so I think that gives us an idea of where we're starting. I'll come back with some updates on progress, any things that I find as far as, well, yeah, the kit was great for this, but it wasn't great for that. I don't know. So far, it looks great. But if I do find some issues to be aware of, then I'll make a little video about those. I do have a couple more parts to print. They're not going to hold up fabrication, though. They're more of the end of the putting the panels on, putting the door on the panel, stuff like that can wait till the end. We don't need those printed right away. And I imagine it's going to take me a while to get to where I need those pieces. I just wanted to put a video out there of where we're going right now. I don't have any live streams going on right now. I am teaching a course, a measurements course, but it's a face-to-face, so it's not one that I'm live streaming. Probably in the winter there will be a little bit of chance to do some live streaming. Certainly next summer, and maybe, I don't know if there's interest in live streaming one of these. There are other people out there live streaming fabrication. They're building their own Vorons, even the Zeros, and so they're already out there, so I don't know what I would add to that. I'm going to build it more as a summary of, hey, I did this today and I noticed these things, and then I really want to get to using it to where we can print from it. But that's what I'm working on right now. I have some other projects kind of in the background that aren't ready to do even a video about yet. I haven't gotten that far with them. But just kind of update of what we're doing right now, and the kind of things that you can look forward to. All right, I will see y'all soon.